Okay, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for attending the meeting of the Planning Committee on Thursday, the 13th of January, 2022. I'd like to wish you all a very happy new year and hopefully a healthy one. I'm Councillor Caleb Tomlinson. I'm the chair of this committee. This meeting is being recorded and the stream will be live on YouTube. The web address for this is displayed on the agenda for the meeting. If you're attending the meeting because you are a member of the public who has registered to speak, please note you have a time limit of 4 minutes. You will be timed, and I will confirm when 4 minutes runs out. You should then finish, or if in the middle of making a point, wind up. When I invite you to, please come to the microphone, or if you're dialing in via Teams, unmute your microphone when I invite you to speak. Voting will be undertaken using the electronic system, and the outcome of the vote will then be confirmed by our legal officer, Geordie, once complete. I'll just begin with some housekeeping. If you've got mobile phones, please put them on silent. We're not expecting a fire alarm this evening, so if it does go off, there will be a fire somewhere. The exit is to my right. We will meet on the grassy verge. While you're moving around the building, if you can make sure you've got your masks on, because COVID is still rampant, and there is hand sanitizer around the building if you wish to use it. If I can now ask everyone to introduce themselves, we will start with Geordie to my left and go around one by one.
Good evening, Jodie Ingram, and I'm the Senior Solicitor.
Good evening, Stephen Brown, Head of Development Management.
Good evening, Debbie Roberts, Planning Officer.
Bill Smith, representing New Longton and Hutton East.
Chris Lomax, Walton Liddale East.
Councillor Claire Hunter, Banbury East.
Councillor Damien Bretherton, Walton Liddale West.
Councillor Kath Unsworth, St Ambrose Ward.
Councillor Caroline Moon, I represent Buckshorn Worden.
Good evening all. Councillor John Hesketh representing Longton and Hutton West.
Good evening, Councillor Gary Yates, Sainsbury and Waltons.
Charlotte Lynch, Democratic Services Officer.
Okay, do we have apologies for absence?
Yes, Chair, we've had apologies from Councillors Mal Donoghue, Will Adams and Mary Green, and Councillors Kath Unsworth and Damien Brereton are here substituting.
Okay, thanks very much for that. Councillor Bretherton, you're becoming super sub. Do we have any declarations of interest, please? Councillor Smith.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I didn't realise that I would have, to be quite honest, but on entering the room, I do know one of the speakers. I'm not quite sure what he's speaking on, but I have probably a good guess. We were both members or directors of the Leisure Trust as and when it was operational, but obviously we've not spoken for a couple of years or so now. I don't know what level of interest I would need to.
Yeah, I don't think that's prejudicial or any other thing, do you, Geordie?
Obviously, it is a matter ultimately for yourself, but if you're saying that you haven't spoken to him and you don't feel like you would be prejudiced when making your decision, but if you do feel like that would be a prejudicial interest, my advice would be that you would need to leave the room when the matter is being voted on.
Okay. I'm quite happy with that, Chair. I don't have that sort of interest, so I'd be quite happy to deal with it either way. Thank you.
Okay, great. I have read the minutes of the last meeting held on the 9th of December. I am quite happy to sign them as a correct. I have a seconder in Councillor Hesketh. Thanks, Councillor Hesketh, so I will sign them off. And item number 5 this evening, Stephen, appeal decisions, please.
Yes, Chair, we've got one appeal to report tonight. It relates to 23 Manor Avenue in Penwitham, which is a detached property. There was a proposal for a 2-storey side extension, a single-storey rear extension and a porch and bay window to the front. It was actually a delegated decision and we refused it on grounds of impact on the character and appearance of the area and impact on the living conditions of the occupiers of the adjacent property in terms of loss of light, privacy and outlook. The inspector concluded they felt the property wasn't of great architectural merit, so didn't agree with the first point in terms of character and appearance of the area, but did totally agree with the second point that it would unduly impact on the living conditions of the adjacent property number 21, and subsequently dismissed the appeal. So another successful one. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks for that, Stephen. Rather remiss of me, ladies and gentlemen. Made my first error of the year. We need to vote on the minutes, and I just completely forgot about them because I agree with them. So if we could go to the vote on the minutes, if we can, please. Don't forget, if you weren't here, just abstain. Okay, I will now sign off the minutes, and we will move to item number 6 this evening. The Rose of Farrington, 59 Stanleyfield Lane, Leyland, and I would like Debbie to present the item. Thank you.
Can you hear me? Yeah, there we go. Rose at Farrington, public house at ground floor, and it has a 5-bedroom manager's flat upstairs. So the junction of Stanleyfield Lane and Crown Street. There's pedestrian access into the building itself from the front off Stanleyfield Lane and from the side on Crown Street. To the south, there is a car park with a small screened amenity cum smoking area. There's residential and commercial properties across the road, across Crown Street. The amenity space is fenced in, as is the amenity space at the rear. There's a driveway alley, for want of a better word, which provides access to the rear of properties on Mill Street and on Crown Street. I beg your pardon, I lost my train of thought completely there. I'll show you in a second. There is an alleyway that runs between the adjacent property and the application site, and there are rooms above that alleyway. Now, they belong to the neighbouring property and they're not included in the application. I'll show you that in a minute. Residential and commercial properties on Farrington's local centre are around here. They're present on all sides, and the site is designated as existing built-up area by the local plan. So there is a general presumption towards development, all other matters being acceptable. Sorry about that, I lost my train of thought. Front elevation of the property. This is the alleyway and the rooms above which belong to this property, and they're not included in the application. Okay, we've got a view of the side elevation, viewed from Crown Street. The alleyway which takes you to the rear of Mill Street, and the area in red is where the proposed extension will be, and I'll show you that in a second. This car park is all private for the pub itself. A view of the screened amenity space to the rear. Beyond that are the rear elevations of Mill Street. And the view of the site from Stanleyfield Lane into Crown Street. This is the car park on the right-hand side, and this just behind the hedge, I apologise, my photograph's not great, that's where the proposed extension will be. Okay, the application takes 4 parts. Conversion of the public house and 5-bedroom manager's flat into 10 apartments, 2-storey side extension, demolition of a small structure at the rear, and 2 new dormers on the rear roof plane. So the 2 dormers would be, you can see them on the left-hand picture, just allow for for headroom in the attic space, with bedroom and ensuite windows, and they face westwards. The extension itself is a 2-storey. Be on the southern side, and it would be roughly where the screened amenity space is, the smoking area. It was 7 metres deep by 9 metres with a pitched roof, and it's set down from the main roof. Independent front access, which you can just see on the lower photograph for apartments 4 and 8, and it would be in red brick to blend in with a wider street scene. It complements the pub, but the majority of properties in that area are red brick ones. The applicant wants to find a long-term viable use to prevent the building becoming vacant and in time open to dereliction. Inside, we would have 10 apartments over 3 floors. Ground floor, including the extension, is 4 apartments, 3 one-bedders and 1 two-bedder with a communal entrance which comes off Stanyfield Lane. The first floor is 4 one-bed apartments, and the attic will be 2 one-bed apartments. The roof height remains the same, they'd just be going into the attic space. We've had 10 objections and 1 letter of support, and they're detailed in the report. I've also had 2 late letters of objection. The first is an objection to use of the land outside the applicant's ownership, but I've checked the land registry documents for the entire area, and in my opinion, the ownership certificates have been served correctly. Permission can be granted regardless of land ownership, and it's up to the developer then to get the relevant permissions beyond that. Secondly, we've had a very late objection from Farrington Parish Council, who object to loss of a viable business for community use and use for events, negative impact on the area in terms of antisocial behaviour, parking and lost amenity. The fact that the scheme doesn't allow for 2 parking spaces per flat, but in terms of parking standards, they don't need that, and Lancashire County Council are happy with the standards. And that the scheme isn't in the interests of the community. It's a subjective comment. All the other comments have been addressed in the report, and there are no statutory objections. As I say, Lancashire County Council are happy with this. It's a sustainable location near to a bus route and within walking distance of a train service. It's a spatially acceptable proposal. In design terms, it's considered acceptable, and something very similar has been done on the railway pub, which is just south of this scheme, and it works really well. It's policy compliant, and we would recommend approval with conditions. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, Debbie, thanks for that report. Right, I have a registered speaker in objection to this application. Mr. Bill Furman, if you'd like to come forward and make your objections. We have 4 minutes, okay?
Mr. Chairman and members of the Planning Committee, I thank you for giving me the opportunity of voicing my concerns on this proposed development. My concerns are as follows. Parking. This is already a major problem. Local residents currently use the Rose car park to alleviate lack of space in Crown Street. And as this proposed development also does not have sufficient car parking spaces allocated, this will worsen an already difficult situation. I already have vehicles illegally parked on double yellow lines outside my office from 4 p.m. by people using the local chippy, as there is just nowhere to park in Crown Street. Additional traffic caused by the development, with more vehicles entering Crown Street, will make a busy road dangerous, as it is already a very busy very busy one-way system, as drivers use Crown Street for access to the local school in the morning and afternoon, and there will be simply nowhere to park. Where will the developers, workmen park whilst working on this development? Assuming that all materials delivered to the site will come via Crown Street, how does the developer propose to remove any debris or scrap materials? Assuming skips are used, this has the potential of blocking Crown Street, which, remember, is part of the one-way system. Replaced on Stanyfield Lane, this will create a traffic hazard on a main road, and this is without commenting on the mess and inconvenience to local residents. The constant building noise and disruption caused by this development will have an adverse effect on my business, as the disruption will occur between the hours of 8 to 5, Monday to Friday, which coincides with my business hours. Constant noise will affect mine and my staff's ability to concentrate on their work, and also affect their health and well-being, as we rely on a reasonable quiet to enable us to absorb and work on technical concepts which will prove impossible with a constant wall of sound. The proposed plans show an existing kitchen extension is going to be demolished. Has the developer considered how this will be achieved without coming onto my land? Both 59 and 61 Stanleyfield Lane cellars are prone to flooding, as they're the lowest point of the sewer system running from the far end of Mill Street to Stanleyfield Lane. We have already had 2 major floods, which United Utilities have compensated us for, and we have also improved our internal cellar manhole to try and stop the flooding. But we've been told by United Utilities that they cannot guarantee it will not happen again. What will be the effect on the sewer system of adding an additional 10 housing units? Lancashire County Council on the 17th of December 2021 have drawn attention to the fact that no drainage strategy has been submitted by the developer. And with the addition of 10 new units, the main sewers may not be able to cope, and neither might the surface water drainage either. 59 and 61 Stanleyfield Lane being old buildings, I'm worried that any excess vibration could cause our building at 61 to collapse and lead to structural damage, especially if additional foundation work is necessary. Finally, my suggestion would be for the council to consult with the local residents to find out what they would like to happen to the building. Since I've been in Farrington running my practice since 1989, we've lost our post office, newsagent, shoe shop and convenience store. The commercial hub has been decimated. So if more housing is given priority, any remaining commercial businesses will disappear, leaving no focal point to gender any community spirit, and the individuality of Farrington will disappear, leaving no soul to the area, and can only increase the current incidence of antisocial behaviour.
Okay, thanks for your presentation, Mr. Berman. Debbie, would you like to come in with any comments on that before I bring in the ward councillor?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Just to clarify a few points. Yes, the local residents do use the car park, but it is a private car park and it could be secured off at any point. The applicant's been relaxed about residents using the car park, but it is private land. Lancashire County Council are happy that the parking standards and the sustainable location from a highways point of view, they don't achieve the severe impact that's necessary for the refusal in highways terms. Construction noise and nuisance is considered to be a temporary nuisance, but condition 4 of the application proposes a pre-commencement construction management statement. And if the developer can't do what we need him to do, then he's not going to be able to develop. The same applies for conditions 9 and 10, which are for the drainage strategy. It's unusual to ask for drainage in advance. It's expensive and time consuming, and this is standard process to ask for, put conditions on there. Again, if it can't be worked out, the development can't go ahead. It's as simple as that. United Utilities don't have an objection on drainage terms. Land ownership, as I've already mentioned, it's outside of the remit of this determination, but the applicant will need to deal with land ownership issues separately. And from a lost heritage and design perspective, other than cosmetic changes to the existing building, there'll be no external change to the existing building. There'll be an extension, which is a relevant design, but the actual building itself will be upgraded, so there shouldn't be any loss of heritage in that area. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thanks for those points, Debbie. All right, Councillor Wharton-Hardman, you have 4 minutes, okay?
Thank you, Chair. And good evening, and thank you for allowing me to speak as one of the 2 councillors for Farrington East. My colleague, Councillor Olty, was going to be joining us this evening via Teams, but unfortunately has been called away urgently in the last hour, so I do apologise, but I do speak on both our behalves. So this is the first time in my 7 years as a councillor that I've called a planning matter into committee, and I do so at the request of the many residents who've contacted both Councillor Olty and myself as their elected representatives. I'm very sure as experienced planning members, you will have taken the time to read the agenda reports pack and also look at the documentation on the online planning portal. And I don't propose to sit here and take you through the information contained within the pack bit by bit, but I would like to highlight several points. The officer comments this evening, and on page 2, bullet point 2.3, it does state that there are no statutory objections. I would like to draw members' attention to a letter available on the public planning portal sent to this authority on the 17th of December by the lead local flood authority, Lancashire County Council, which states the lead local flood authority objects to this development proposal on the basis that no drainage strategy has been submitted. It continues to state that the property lies within a flood zone and the submission of basic information on how surface water is intended to be managed is vital if the local planning authority is to make informed planning decisions. In the absence of any information at all regarding surface water management, the flood risks resulting from the proposed development are unknown, and this is therefore sufficient reason in itself for refusal of a planning permission. The gentleman spoke earlier on regarding the flooding of the basement, and I think this is quite pertinent information for members to be aware of this evening. I do fully respect and appreciate what the officers have stated in the report at section 8.3 on page 13, that flooding doesn't have to be taken into account with this application. But it is concerning that the local lead flooding authority have formally objected to this, and members of this committee were not made aware within the report pack. It is also noted within the report that Farrington Parish Council have submitted a formal objection. And I'm not going to sit here and repeat what the officers stated, and they are the terms which they have objected on. Turning to material planning matters, as experienced members, I am sure you have taken the time to look at the proposed design of the extension. Sadly, not in the reports pack, but we have been shown this evening and is currently on the screens. You will note the floor-to-glass ceiling. I am sure you will agree with me that this is not in keeping with the area. The public house is surrounded by terraces over 100 years old, with Farrington previously being a small mill village. I just don't quite think the applicant has got the design right. I am aware, and the officers mentioned that the report on page 16.9.5.2 states a building with a very similar external appearance has been constructed at the Railway Inn on Preston Road, 300 metres south, which works well, and I agree it does. However, this is 300 metres away in an area which is not surrounded by residential properties, but businesses, a train station, former car showroom and takeaways, not traditional properties comprising mainly terraced mill cottages and buildings of the late 19th century. Whilst the County Highways Department have made no objection to the proposal, I would also challenge the validity of the data they have used to substantiate this. I have written 17 letters to both the Highways Authority and our County Councillor over the previous 5 years with regards to parking issues at this location and the terrible situation with the one-way system which this property would fall into. The Highways Authority state it won't bring an increase in traffic. Figures show that on average there are 2 cars per household. This is potentially 20 cars in an area already blighted with parking issues. Currently, as a local pub, patrons usually walk here, so there is clearly going to be an increase in both traffic and parking. If members were not minded to refuse this application, I would ask members to consider whether it would be appropriate to defer, not only to address the lead flooding authority's comments, but also to review the designs of the proposed extension. Thank you.
Okay, thanks for your presentation, Councillor Walton-Hardman. Do we have Jake Salisbury, the agent, with us this evening? Good evening.
Good evening.
Yeah,
Thank you very much for your time.
if you'd like to make your presentation, you have 4 minutes, okay?
Yeah. So Debbie's done obviously a great job of kind of talking you through the application, so I won't obviously go over old ground. I'm just trying to pick up on points that have kind of been referenced and where I think I can kind of assist. In terms of the design, I think in the area, I don't know whether obviously people have been down and had a look, but there's a complete mix of designs, you know, as the area has developed over the years. I think we've worked really hard with officers to come up with something that, you know, is more modern in appearance, but still, you know, we've got we've kept the materials sympathetic to the local area, you know, and we've worked hard with with Debbie to ensure that, you know, it is a scheme that adds interest as well as remaining in keeping. Moving on to sort of the parking aspect, while I appreciate that residents park on what is a failing pub at the moment, I don't think the owner of the pub can be prejudiced to provide permanent parking for residents. We've obviously liaised with Highways, who have no objection to the scheme. There's great transport links in the area. To speculate that a pub would generate less sort of traffic than residential apartments is purely, that would be speculation. There's no data or sort of information to substantiate those claims, and particularly a pub actually could generate more traffic. However, in this instance, yeah, I will accept that because it's failing. Yeah, the parking is sort of available towards the rear. In terms of the land ownership issue, that land is actually within the blue edge, and we offered to remove that. However, we have an obligation to provide plans that are in accordance with land registry, and the land registry plans state that, you know, the land is owned by our client, so it had to remain within the blue. However, there's no issues in terms of, you know, converting the building, and it will all be done in accordance with building regulations. Just to close out, the scheme, as is recommended by your professional officers, is policy compliant. You know, and we've worked hard to ensure that that is the case. There's nothing before us that would prevent determination of the application tonight. Debbie's quite rightly used a series of conditions to ensure that sufficient information is provided in terms of during the construction process that would, you know, protect the amenity of residents. And I see no reason why, you know, Debbie's hard work should be thrown away, and we should be back here discussing it again. Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks for your presentation. Debbie, would you like to come back in with any points?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I just want to clarify one point. Councillor Wharton-Hardman is right. We did have a late representation from the LLFA. It's dated the 17th, but it only hit our system during the Christmas period, at which point the agenda for this report had closed, and that's why it's not included. I've made the point in the report that it is only for a net gain of 9 dwellings, and that's general under LLFA's threshold as well. So we wouldn't normally expect anything. I've had a look at it, and they have objected because of a lack of a drainage plan. As I've already mentioned, the conditions 9 and condition 10 ask for drainage based on sustainable drainage principles to be provided to us prior to any commencement on site. So in my opinion, this could still be determined, and this will still work with the LLFA objection. They have said that to overcome the objection, we need to provide that information, and we can do that with a positive decision. But if members feel that they want to go back and look at this fully, and I'll be honest, I would come back with probably the same conditions, I would request you defer it rather than refuse it on that basis. But we can cover this objection and form that, allow for that withdrawal with conditions 9 and 10. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thanks for that, Debbie. Anyone on committee who isn't actually in good knowledge about Crown Street and the surrounding area? I was an actual resident Crown Street for 7 years, from the year 2000, and I never knew it flood once while I lived there, and I lived at number 1, which is directly opposite the building in question. So anyway, I'm going to open up to committee, and Councillor Moon.
Thanks, Chair. Okay. I'm not completely happy. I'm just going to put that straight out there. I'm not. On 2 points and 2 points only, which I'll focus on. One is the flooding, and I respectfully take on board what you've just said, Chair, but I've also listened to the gentleman who said that they've had 2 major floods, which United Utilities have compensated them for. So I think, we've got to balance that. I want to talk about the lack of the drainage plan, and I want to talk about design. If I do the drainage plan first, I totally respect what Debbie's just said to us about it coming in late and that they've looked at it and that they feel they can deal with it in conditions. But I feel as a committee member, sat in this position too many times where it's going to come after the event. And I know at times it's financially makes more sense for things to come after the event, or that's the way it is in planning. But for me, there comes a point where we've no idea what that drainage plan is going to suggest. We've no idea what impact that may or may not have in this area or on residents or on other residents' properties, etc., etc. And I feel like it's a bit of a watering down, frankly, of the planning committee's ability to make decisions in absence of all the information. So for me, when I've got a page full on 20 that carries over to 21 of notes around this, I've got a gentleman who's come tonight and said they've had 2 major floods and been compensated for them. We've got this letter from a lead local flood authority that's saying that it would be a refusal from their point of view without this information. I would feel more comfortable on this application, on this occasion, in deferring the application to have that plan. So that's my first point, Chair. My second point is I don't personally feel that that design is quite right. And I feel like a little bit deja vu of when I sat for an application on Fox Lane, where we had a school wall, a heritage wall that we were looking to incorporate into a design to ensure that it was all in keeping with Fox Lane. And we sent that back a few times and got to a really good place with it. And now I defy anybody to even know when you drive down Fox Lane that there's a new development. And I would also draw your attention to an application we did on Dunkirk Lane, where we started from a position of traditional terrace properties, and there was going to be an add-in, like a Muse add-in. And we sent that back a few times, and we were told on that first meeting, oh, it's in keeping, we've tried to do this, we've done that, we've modernised within the heritage, all the rest of it. It wasn't quite right, and we sent it back. And again, I would take anybody to Dunkirk Lane to say that's an example of really good planning, where when you work together, you can get something new into an existing area and not create any visual harm. The glazing there for me is not in keeping. I take on board the railway point, but I would go back to what Councillor Wharton-Hardman said, that it's in a different set of street scene, the railway, and it does work well. That is opposite mill cottages, terraces, it's adjacent to terraces. They say you circa late 19th century, it's not there for me. That's not quite right, and I think we can do better, and I think we're in a Fox Lane, Dunkirk Lane position tonight, where we should defer it and we should say, thank you for everything you've done so far, but we can go a little bit further and we can get something better there. And then hopefully with a good drainage plan that doesn't impact anybody adversely, and a design that is more in keeping with the traditional properties in the area, we can give this planning permission. But for me, it's not tonight, Chair, and I would move deferral.
Okay, thanks for that, Councillor Moon. Councillor Flannery.
Thanks, Chair. As we always do when we come to the committee, we balance everything out. It's always really good to have the input from fors and against. So thanks for coming tonight and doing that. But on the balance of what I'm hearing and what I'm reading, I'm with Councillor Moon on this in terms of we can't be diluting the process. The conditions are all well and good, and they serve the process well. But there are some fundamentals, I think, in there which could because you give approval and you can't get a drainage design, then it's useless. So why haven't we got the drainage design done before? I know it costs a little bit more money, but that's the name of the game. I've got no problem with the adjacency issues. I've got no problem with the design. Unfortunately, I've got no problem with the inconvenience because it's a mobile sector. In terms of development, it comes and it goes. But I do have some issues around two things. One is the drainage issue, and one is the parking, because we're saying here in our report that the site has utilised car park, and whilst obviously parking guidelines for South Ribble cannot be achieved in this location, well, why can't they be achieved? Because we've got apartments here, people are going to have to live there, people are going to want to park there. So if there is an issue, we need to resolve it. So, but another further point is, when the ward councillors speak, we have to sit up and listen because they represent the residents. And I think in terms of balance, I think that's really important as well that we factor that in. So I'm going to second the deferment of Councillor Mill. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Flannery. Councillor Yates.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've had a look at this development and I couldn't see anything completely wrong. I was listening to what the residents say, and antisocial behaviour, that's a police matter. It's not for us, I don't think. The problems with parking, well, it's private land anyway. So, you know, an LCC are saying there is no problems there. So that would be, to me, it could be the county council for that area to have a look at that after, because we're going to LCC, they haven't got problems. The development, the site of it with that glass, I've seen that done before in my area, and it becomes quite attractive. It does break it up. So I have no problem with that whatsoever. The only problem I have got is that we haven't got a flooding report. I would like to see every application come through with a report on flooding. But I do look down there and see what Debbie's saying, because in the conditions 9 and 10, really this is down to United Utilities' problem, because they have a problem in the cellars there with flooding. That should have been addressed, and really should have been in the report today, saying how they was going to resolve that problem. Otherwise, from that, I'd be moving approval, Chair, tonight. But seeing 2 councillors have already gone for deferral, I'll not rock the boat. I'll leave it there unless anybody else changes it round. But I think the conditions 9 and 10 did cover it, and leave it there. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Yates. Debbie, did you not say if the flood assessment went against them, it wouldn't get planning permission, it would get knocked back anyway?
Not so much so. Councillor Yates asked for a flood report, but it's flood zone 1 and the size of the site dictates that we can't ask for a flood risk assessment. United Utilities have no objection. We've put conditions on to make sure that we do have a proper drainage strategy, and they have to work with us, and there are times when drainage strategies just can't be worked out and developments fall by the wayside, but we've put everything we can in to make sure that drainage and flooding, if there was any risk, is mitigated, and that these conditions will also cover the objection from the LLFA. Just to address 2 other things, parking. The MPPF is clear that you can only refuse on parking if it's severe, and Lancashire County Council don't think it is. So we would be at a loss if we were challenged on that. And whilst design is very subjective, there are differences between Fox Lane, say, and this site. Fox Lane is a conservation area. The wall was a listed wall, and we have to take that into account. This is neither listed nor a conservation area. It's not even on a local list, and it would allow for the upgrade of, yes, a traditional building, but even had it been a conservation asset, conservation thinking these days is that you should put modern buildings next to old, modern extensions on old, so that there's that juxtaposition. You can see the timeline. You shouldn't try and replicate the original. It doesn't work, and it always looks twee, and we wouldn't ask the developer to do that. But as I said, design is a very subject thing. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, so just put my mind at rest. We cannot demand a flood assessment.
The developer can provide one if he wishes to do so, but we can't ask for one. It's flood zone 1 and it's less than a hectare in size, so we can't demand one. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks for that, Debbie. Councillor Yates.
Thank you. I think Debbie misunderstood me there. I weren't saying I was demanding a flood assessment. The only thing I was saying that, you know, flood risk, we can get that from LCC straight away, a flood risk assessment for any land or whatsoever. So we're only meaning that way. And when you look back, and I'm agreeing with what Debbie said, is that this conditions 9 and 10 will cover this under United Utilities problem. So with that said, and what Debbie's thing, I'm looking at really why are we going to defer this one? Because we know what the problem is. The officers know what the problem is. I didn't before I came here, but I do now. I know what the problem is, and I know it can be resolved with a condition. So I will move for approval.
Okay, Councillor Yates. Councillor Watson.
Thank you, Chair. Most people have said what I would have said anyway already, so I'm not going to cover all ground, though, apart from the fact that I do actually quite like the design element, and I certainly, again, I appreciate it is subjective, but I do agree with the juxtaposition issue. Again, I work with design all day, so it's what I would have done in that scenario. But absolutely, I'm reasonably content with what Debbie said around the flood issue, and that's the one thing that would have turned me to deferral, to be honest with you. So I'm happy to second Councillor Yates's for approval.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Watson. Do we have anybody else wanting to speak on the application? Councillor Hesketh.
Establishments of these natures are closing very, very fast. And if we did go along with the application, it would provide much needed homes for, well, I would say individuals or maybe odd couples. It's in quite a busy area. It does have a good bus service and so forth. And I think it would blend in all right with the area. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and I will go along with approval as Councillor Yates has proposed.
Okay, thanks for that, Councillor Hesketh. Do we have any other members of the committee wishing to speak on this application or not? Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Chair. I'm sort of hovering on the edge of both, really, to be quite honest, and whilst on the face of it, it's a reasonably straightforward application, and it is providing some much needed housing in the area. I do have some sympathy with the parking area down there. I know it fairly well. I've tried to park down there myself on occasions when visiting the school that's down there, and it's really, really difficult. But whether this will make the problem worse or not is another story. And if the car park itself is sectioned off, which it could be at any time, the parking problem will still be there. So I'm not 100% sure whether it will make the parking worse or not. With regard to the flooding, there's obviously an issue somewhere that we haven't quite sort of got to grips with, I don't think, yet. There's a page and a bit of notes on flooding, and for something which is a pretty small application in the general scheme of things, to have all these sort of comments on there. There's obviously some issues there that, as I say, I don't think we've quite got to grips with. And whilst condition 9 and 10 does sort of, in most ways, address the problem, and it's something that's got to happen when it said the reason planning authority, the details proposed for the drainage are acceptable before work commences. Now, I have mentioned this at planning on quite a few occasions, that we're only getting part reports, and I always find them very, very difficult, particularly with flooding, and we've had quite a lot of flooding that's gone on in a few areas. And we never see anything actually come back to the planning committee. It's done on condition. The application comes in, and the condition is discharged without the committee and having any input into it at all. And for me, I know there's a cost involved when there's so much difficulty, and there must be some difficulty with the amount of notes that are there. There must be something somewhere that county and the flooding authority are not quite happy with. I'd be quite happy to vote for not refusal on that, but for deferment. With regard to what it looks like, I don't think I have a particular problem with it. It looks something different than there's on Stanisfield Lane, that's for sure. And again, I think it's very, very subjective in whether you like it or whether you don't like it. It's a matter of personal opinion. Does it fit in? Probably not. Do I hate it enough to vote against it? Probably not. It's one of the difficult ones. So I think we'll just see what members have to say on the subject. But I do have problems with the issues with regard to the flooding and what is being said there. And if it is, I would like something to come back to this committee rather than just discharging through the conditions. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Smith. Councillor Lomax.
Yeah, thank you. Due to conditions 9 and 10, I am happy to actually vote for this. In regard of the design of the building, yeah, if you are putting something onto a listed building, it's got to be shown to be different. And the brick that appears to be shown would fit in with the area, but it's not about the design for me. I mean, that's okay. It's just, is 9 and 10 strong enough for us? I believe it is, but if other people on the committee would prefer to defer, then I'm happy for it, but I'm also happy for it to go ahead.
Thanks, Councillor Lomax. Debbie?
Yeah, just to explain something, I don't know whether this might help members, get my right glasses on. When United Utilities assess something from a flood risk perspective, they'll look to see whether there is more vulnerable accommodation at the level where the water comes in. And often if houses are developed in a floodplain or in an area that's likely to flood, one of the ways to mitigate it is to have subterranean drainage attenuation. That might be a cellar, that might be attenuation tanks, but it's under the ground. So the water comes in, goes under the ground. We've just done a house in Wantley Dale that's on stilts for the same reason. The water goes underneath it. There is no more vulnerable accommodation going into this than already exists. And the gentleman who spoke earlier did say that the cellars in this building flood. Not the building, the cellar. And if we were building this as a new house and allowed it in a flood zone, we would expect some sort of mitigation, be it a tank or a cellar or somewhere to catch water in the meantime, so that the people in the more vulnerable accommodation could get out of that building. This already has it, and that's why United Utilities haven't objected. Thanks, Chair.
Yeah, thanks very much, Debbie, for that. Councillor Hesketh.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think there's been quite a bit of debate in connection with flooding and so forth. In my mind, is there any more area of ground created by the development of this site? Will there be more water? Well, I can't see how there can be any more water. It only falls on the area that we're talking about. And so it's not going to be any different whether he does it now or leaves it as it is. I'll leave it at that, Mr. Chairman.
Right, okay, I'm going to draw the debate to a close now. Councillor Moon moving deferral, seconded by Councillor Flannery. And then we had amendment by Councillor Yates for approval, seconded by Councillor Watson. I'm going to take the amendment first. So this is voting for approval of this application. If you're for, press your for button. If you're against, and if you're in two minds, press abstain. Okay, Jodie, that's the vote complete. Could you confirm tonight's outcome, please?
The application, excuse me, in respect of Rosa Farrington, 59 Stannyfield Lane, has been approved by 8-4, and that is approved subject to the conditions in the report. Yeah, the motion was carried by 8.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Jodie. So that has been carried. If you're just here for that application, if you could leave with the face mask on, if anybody wants to use the ladies and gents facilities, you can do. I'll give you a couple of minutes before we move on to item number 7 this evening. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, less of the joviality, please. Let's move on to item number 7 this evening, 55 Towngate, Leyland. And once again, it's Debbie Roberts to present, please.
Thank you, Chair. Bit quicker one, I think, this time. We've got 55 Towngate, which is the former bookmakers on the corner of St Andrew's Way and Towngate-ish. The applicant wishes to change the use of it from the bookmakers, which is sui generis class, to hot food takeaway, in this case Pizza Hut. It's surrounded on all sides by commercial premises. The nearest residential are 90 metres northwest and northeast, which are these ones. There's no off-road parking, but there are car parks, public car parks, which I've noted in green, and there's a small service area to the rear. The application also includes a new shop front, almost the same, but the doors would be shifted from the right-hand side just to the centre. The advertisement has already been approved with a separate application. Proposal hours are 11 in the morning till 11 at night, similar to some in the area, but others in the wider area, including the Wonderland Chinese restaurant, which is immediately behind. That's got 24-hour use, as of others, so it's relatively low. There would also be some extraction and acoustic equipment on the rear. That's subject to conditions that Environmental Health have put forward. And as you can see, this is a view from the back access yard, if you will, back of the library. You're almost not going to be able to see them because of the existing wall and other buildings in the way. No representation, no objection from statutory consultees, and we will go with approval with conditions. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thanks, Debbie. I don't have any registered speakers on this application. I don't have any of the ward members on this application. I do have the agent, Adam Beamish, via Teams. Good evening, Adam. If you'd like to make your representation, we have 4 minutes for you.
Good evening. Good evening. Thank you, Chair. Good evening, members. I'm not going to take up 4 minutes of your time. I really only registered to speak in case anybody registered to speak against. Obviously, I fully support your officer's thorough report, and to be honest, I'll leave it there in the circumstances. Thank you.
Well, I wish all speakers were that quick. Councillor Smith.
Yeah. Well, there's a speaker here. It'll be brief as well. Can I move approval, Chair? Thank you.
You certainly can. Councillor Hesketh.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We don't like to have empty properties in South Ribble. It doesn't give a good image, so I think we should go along with the application, Mr. Chairman. So I go for approval.
Thanks, Councillor Hesketh. Councillor Lomax.
I'd just like to confirm it's a Pizza Hut, not a Kentucky Fried Chicken, but a Pizza Hut.
Who'd have thought? Humour at planning. Councillor Flannery, would you like to come in?
No.
Well, Leyland's arrived, a Pizza Hut, eh? I don't think we've got any other... No more proposals. Let's go straight to the vote then. This is for approval of the Pizza Hut at 55 Towngate Leyland. If we can go to the vote electronically, please. Jodie, if you'd like to confirm the outcome of that vote.
Members have voted unanimously to approve the application for 55 Towngate Lane, and that is approved subject to the conditions in the report.
Okay, wonderful. Thanks very much for your attendance this evening, ladies and gentlemen. If we can leave in an orderly manner, if we can manage that, don't forget to put your masks on. All right. Thanks very much for your attendance. We'll see you next month.